That type of guidance is so powerful. You just know, and for me, and I just know, I knew to the core of my being. And I wouldn't take no for an answer. And you can imagine that I heard a lot of no's. And I think they called me a cashless investor. And I had a number of people that just called me outright crazy. Well, the first thing I would do is really sit down and understand why you hate what you're doing. What is it? Is it the job? Is it the person you've become? Is it that you're so stressed out when you get home that it's causing turmoil there? What is it? Because until you define the it, until you can start narrowing down what the it is, then it's just this general, I hate my job. And, unless you can name it, you can't do anything about it.
I'm Art Blanchford, and this is Life in Transition. Welcome back to the Life in Transition podcast. Today, our guest is Stacie Shifflett. And Stacie is a student of life who sees the big picture, the details, and what's missing at the same time. She leads in the practical application of personal development. So all of us know about personal development. All of us read and listen and podcasts and go to workshops, but to apply it is the key. So Stacie, I'm really excited to have you here on the Life in Transition podcast. Welcome.
Thank you, Art. I'm really excited to be here with you.
So jumping right in, Stacie, for you, what would you consider to be one of the most important transitions you've been through, whether it's meaningful, difficult, impactful on your life? Like, what resonates with you right now as one of the most important transitions you've been through in your life?
Well, I would probably have to say career-wise, really. I mean, I have had a number of careers. I have done a lot of different things, from tending bar and waiting tables to raising llamas. I had a llama farm for over a decade, as a matter of fact. But transitioning out of what I did when I was younger, which was in the hospitality business, into an office job, was probably one of the biggest. And it was difficult because that industry did not have the reputation that it has today, right? It wasn't perceived back in the 70s. I'm going to date myself, as a legitimate career. And of course, it certainly is now. So it was difficult to get that first job. And in all honesty, a friend of my mother's from her church gave me an opportunity to work in an office and keep some books and learn some word processing. And that I'm a fast learner. I'm a self-starter, and I'm kind of self-made. I had quit school, and that job, within a year of it and not knowing anything, I literally rolled out the first desktop computers to the entire Department of Health and Human Services at a
Wow.
pretty young age. So it was very impactful.
So you said you'd quit school. So was that high school or college?
College. Yeah. I had some college. High school, I walked into the principal's office in my junior year. My parents got a call and said, "Your principal called us today and said, if you can't graduate this year, you're quitting school." I said, pretty much, I hated high school. And I had the credits, so I graduated and got out on my own a little bit sooner.
So that transition that you made back in the 70s, so some time ago, from the hospitality industry to office work, how did that impact the rest of your life? Like, what was it that made that the most impactful transition that you've been through?
I loved that business, and it has, I grew from there to working as a federal government contractor, and expanded into being a subject matter expert in the world of federal government procurement. And that led me to wake up one morning and go, oh, I need to buy this technology company, with no money, no idea of how to do a merger or an acquisition. It took 9 months, but I did. I found the investors and did the acquisition of a $50 million software company without investing a penny. And, I cashed out of that when they flipped the company in 5 years. So that left me on very solid ground financially.
All right. When was that, Stacie? What time
That
frame
was
was
in
that?
2010. Yeah.
2010. Okay, so 15 years ago now.
Yeah.
So there's two things that are jumping out of me that I want to dig into a little bit. First of all, you said you put the Department of Health and Human Services on PCs, on office computers for the
Yes.
first time.
Yes.
And then the second one is, buying a $50 million software company with no money down, if you will, or none of your own private money invested.
Right.
But let's start with the first one. So you're someone's coming from the hospitality industry, you have a little bit of college, and you get an opportunity, like most of us do, because of somebody that we know, one way or along. We've all had a lot of help along the way. I remember I was up for an honor at one of the university, and the guy that was getting the real honor, I was like the runner-up guy. He said, I'm just a poor boy from East Tennessee. And like they taught us back then, if you see a turtle on a fence post, he had a lot of help getting there.
Yes, indeed.
Right. So we all have a lot of help, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But what is it that gave you the courage and the gumption to start the Health and Human Services on computers? How did that end up being in your responsibility?
It ended up being my responsibility because it was a very small company. She just had a few people, and she had some tragic losses along the way. And so the staff that she was relying on to do that, when she bid the contract and thought she would have people that would be able to execute the services against it, they couldn't. And in the meantime, I just, it's an old saying, but I took to it like a duck to water, right? The computers. And, I learned a lot. And of course, I was learning WordPerfect. I'm going to really date myself, WordPerfect and Lotus 123, right? Doing some work for her. And I have a lot of confidence in myself. I always did. And I knew that I could step into it. And I did. And as you said, I've had good mentors and teachers along the way, and they have supported me, and I have fully supported them. So it's been a very supportive relationship over the years that everybody got the outcome that they were wanting.
Oh, great. How did you come to have so much confidence in yourself?
I think I was born with it. I really was. I had a great family upbringing, and I was always told you can do anything that you want to do. And I also had a stubborn streak, as my mother would say. I'm sure that I know that it caused her some angst along the way, because I was always just very adamant about doing things my way. And I still do, right? I still kind of do things my way, and it's worked. I'm 67, 68 now. Oh my God. It's worked out pretty well for me. So why change?
Right. Okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think a lot of strong support growing up definitely could build that confidence in. So how did that confidence play in when you decided to buy a software company for 50 million, or a 50 million revenue software company?
Yeah. That was the going price at the time. It's since sold a few times. I also really listen to my intuition. Mm-hmm. And I literally, I knew the field. I was a subject matter expert in that area. So I had a lot of expertise. I was familiar with the company. I used to work there. I had kept in touch with some people. I knew their software very well. And I literally just woke up one morning and said, oh my gosh, I need to buy this company. And I was working at...
So you woke up with this thought, like this download or intuition or whatever you want to call it, but it was very clear.
It was very clear.
How do you know to trust that thought and not some other ones? Like, how do you know the difference between that type of guidance and, your critic voice that's coming in or something else? Like, how do you know that difference? That
type of guidance is so powerful. You just know, and for me, and I just know, I knew to the core of my being. And I wouldn't take no for an answer. And you can imagine that I heard a lot of no's. And I think they called me a cashless investor. And I had a number of people that just called me outright crazy. I did pull someone in. I knew that I didn't have the credentials. It's actually a funny story because I was a consultant for Booz Allen Hamilton, working as an independent contractor. And that's actually another funny story that your guests might like to hear, because we forget that we have choices. So we might circle back to that. But I knew that he had an MBA, and I knew that he also had some contacts in the mergers and acquisitions world. So I walked in his office and said, "Hey, let's go do this. And you want to go buy this company?" And he goes, "Sure." And I walked back in his office the next day and said, "I'm serious." And he was like, "Okay." And so I made the call to one of the owners of the company, who I knew at the time. And he said, "Well, we just listed it with a broker." And I thought, "Oh man, that sucks," right? Because I know them, and, but in reality, I would never have made it happen any other way, because I didn't have any money. Right. It wasn't like I could say, "Hey, and I didn't have the expertise at the time to run that company."
But you were an expert in software at that point. You said
yes,
you were
I was expert
so
in
you
the
knew
application.
you could recognize whether the product was good and whether they had,
Oh yeah.
not operationally, but you knew the product very well.
Yeah. I was the one that did the big implementations. Right. So I was the vice president
of that product.
Yeah. I was the vice president of services after the acquisition. And we integrated that software with, federal government agency-wide financial management systems. I did all the business process re-engineering, the change management. I would go in and get these massive projects going, get a team on the ground, get everything working, and then I would leave and go to the next one. And if we were having a difficult client, I was the pinch hitter that they put in to go straighten out the mess. I just was really good at it. I also can't tell you how many millions and millions of dollars of winning proposals that I wrote.
Right. So how did you like come up with, and not to turn this into a geeky, but it is a business show. I mean, I'm a business guy. How did you come up with the capital to buy a $50 million company without putting in any of your own? You came up with it. You didn't have it yourself, but you somehow came up with it. You got investors, or you bought from a bank,
we put a deck together and to pitch the company, and off we went on the dog and pony show, pitching it. Everybody that saw it wanted in, and one of the top investment firms in the U.S., if not in the world, Carlyle, they're the ones that stepped up to the plate and put forth the money. And then, of course, we negotiated our positions within the company. So we had employment contracts, and we had sweat equity contracts,
right?
for lack of a better word. Yeah.
So and that's how you got your equity.
That's where I got my equity.
A lower than market pay, but then you had equity on the back end.
I had decent pay. I actually had really decent pay.
Okay.
And so it was, it was a great experience, and they flipped the company, and I took my money and got out.
All right. No, good for you. Good for you. And I'm still curious, like,
it wasn't without controversy.
No, nothing worthwhile is without controversy. I had a friend once say, if you haven't been deposed or gone bankrupt, you haven't lived in business yet. Right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. The first meeting we had with, the Carlyle Group had brought in a CEO, because the partner that I brought in and myself to do this deal, we didn't have experience running a company of that size. And the very first meeting with him, he's got this beautiful organization chart and everything laid out. And of course, my partner was on there, and I'm looking and I'm like, I'm not on there.
Where am I?
And he says, "Yeah, you're not. I don't know what to do with you." And I'm like, "What do you mean you don't know what to do with me?" "Well, you don't have a degree. You don't have this. You don't have that." And I literally looked at him and said, "You know what? You know exactly what to do with me. First of all, you wouldn't be here if it wasn't for me, because this is my deal." And I literally said this to him. "And secondly, you know exactly where I belong on that chart, because I have an employment contract." And I got up and left the room, and my partner ran after me and said, "Oh, you can't talk to him like that." I'm like, why? He said, well, he's our new boss. And I said, oh no. And by the way, I didn't see you step up to defend me, right?
Right.
Had your name not been on there, I would have defended you,
Right.
and you did not
Right.
defend me. So that's how it started.
And how did it, I mean, we know how it ended, but how did you resolve that situation? Right. You had the courage to have, I call courageous conversation, to say, to have the real conversation that most people would dance around.
Yeah.
The
Well,
elephant in the room.
I was there and I ran the services division and grew it exponentially. And they left me alone and let me do my job. And, a while after that, so I was there for about 5 years, and it was a number of years later that, they just kind of like, they called me into a conference room, with all the C-level executives one day and said, oh, you need to fire half your staff because we decided we're just going to be a software company now and not services. And I'm like, yeah, you can't really tell me that. Just expect me to digest that at the moment,
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
They sort of ended up not doing that, but yeah, I wasn't really liking the environment anymore. And so when the opportunity came, when they flipped the company, I bowed out. They asked me not to, and repeatedly. And I kind of, they wanted the cohesive management team and all of this with the transition. And I was just kind of like, you know what, guys, you probably should have thought about this a little bit sooner.
Right.
And that was fine. So I just left.
So what percentage of the company did you end up earning? How much sweat equity did you get? 3% or 10%?
I don't remember the exact percentage, but I made a lot.
Yeah, good for you. Congratulations.
Thank
good
you.
for you. No, I still am. I'm still back at square one. I may be a little bit slower than you, Stacie. I'm like, again, how do you have the courage one day to wake up and say, I'm going to buy this company, and then actually do that, even if you don't have capital yourself and so forth? That's really unusual.
It is unusual. I wouldn't talk about it for a long time. And it's funny. One of my coaches was like, why do you not talk about this? I'm like, I don't know. It's just me. I mean, it's just what I do. Right. And she's like, no. That's like, people don't just do that.
Right.
So, I don't know. I had a knowing. I believed it in the deepest part of my soul that was what was to be.
And is that
common
for you, Stacie?
Yeah,
to have those type of knowings, like that you really, because I'm trying to decode it a little bit to make it useful for our listeners, right? Like, because if I just say, well, that's just the way I am, then it doesn't apply to somebody else. But if you have studied it a little bit, and if you're really into this, practical application of personal development, like if we could boil that down, like, what are the cues? How do you have the deep knowing? How do you recognize that from something else? Like, how would you teach somebody else to recognize those intuitions versus some other?
You don't listen, for one, to what other people tell you.
Okay.
And you don't succumb to negative, because they will tell you can't do it. You don't succumb to the negative dialogue in your head either. If you feel that powerfully about something, you grab it, you hold on to it and make it happen. And it is possible. I think that so many people don't realize that things are possible because we're so conditioned and programmed.
It's not possible.
Yeah, that, there's a certain way that things work. And this is probably a good time to shift back to the other story that I mentioned, because I was, my son was very, very young. I was fortunate to quit work when he was born, and we bought a farm and I was raising llamas. And, but I did get a phone call one day. I was doing a little bit of technical writing, but I got a phone call one day, said, hey, would you come to work in DC? And so I guess I should listen to what you're offering me before I say no. And so I did. I started back commuting in DC at, I think it was at Department of Labor. And I met some folks from Booz Allen Hamilton there, and they started recruiting me very heavily, and they wanted me to come to work for them. And it was a good offer. But I told them, right, so and I think this is going to get into a little bit of the broader picture of what I do with people, right? I think our joy and what brings us fulfillment is unique to each and every one of us. So at that time in my life, my son was little. There were things that I wanted to do with him. The commute from my farm to DC was ridiculous. I had llamas that I would show all over the country, right?
Oh, wow.
So, they're like big fancy poodles. So they took some grooming, and then I'd load them in a trailer and drive to Oklahoma City or wherever I was going. So
did you go by yourself, or did your son go with you?
I had a friend of mine that raised llamas. She and I got close at the time. And so generally she and I would go together. And so here's Booz Allen just recruiting. And I looked at them.
Were you the first Booz Allen Hamilton partner / llama farmer?
Yes, I believe so.
I love it.
And I told them, I said, you know what? I do not fit your corporate profile. I don't fit it, and I'm never going to.
Right.
And that's literally the conversation. When you talk about difficult conversations, that's the conversation that I had with them. My life was good. I was making money. I was doing what I loved, both in work and at home and with the llamas and raising my son.
Perfect.
But I told them, I said, I'm not interested in that structure. I'm not interested in climbing your corporate ladder. These are the things I'm interested in. I'm interested in working, but I'm interested in going to my son's school play. I'm interested in taking 3 weeks off and showing my llamas. And those are the things that I need to be able to do. And I said all that without fear, right? I wasn't losing something.
Because you didn't need what they were offering? Because you
I didn't. I knew that to keep my life balanced, those were the things that I needed.
Perfect.
And they created a position for me, and they created a hiring mechanism for me to bring me on as a subject matter expert as an independent consultant.
Okay. So external advisor or consultant.
Yes. And I worked a lot. They took care of my needs, and I took care of theirs.
Right.
Nice. And that is where I then went to buy the company. The partner that I pulled into it with me was like the manager of the division that I was in there. He was one of the higher ups in the division. So he went in and told them he was quitting first. And then his boss, he talked to his boss. So his boss called me into his office and said, so-and-so's leaving, and I would like to offer you his position to run that division. And I said, well, actually, he's coming with me. So that's kind of how that went down. But I really think it's a matter of, you have to know what makes you happy and have that balance in your life. Now, there were periods in my life.
How do you know that, though, Stacie? Sorry to interrupt, but this is really important. How do you know what makes you happy?
How do you know?
I agree with you.
Yes.
But I think there's so many of us that have a hard time with that. Right? What is our grand adventure, as Joseph Campbell says, right?
Yeah, I actually have a process for that at this point. And it's, I think one of the first things and the most valuable things to do is actually to sit down and do a full life assessment, right? Look at all of the different domains in your life. And that's not something we're really taught to do, right? We do everything in silos, right? We look at our financial picture. We look at our business. We look at our home life. We look at everything separately. Well, it's all interconnected.
Yes,
so
for sure.
I like to sit down. It's the first thing I do with anybody is sit down and we do a life assessment, and we start to look at things. What's going well is certainly something we look at.
Sure.
And what's not, what's causing you frustration, because I assure you, if you're frustrated in one area of your life or having something that's a challenging experience, it's affecting other areas of your life. It's just disguised.
Right. Yep.
And then the next thing is to sit down and look at what you aspire. And the way that I describe aspirations, and certainly there are some external achievements that come into that, right? But I don't describe it just as that. It's really leaning into, how do you want to feel about this area of your life? And it's a perspective shift, but it's huge. Right. So we might take our career, for example, and we might want to, if we have our own business or whatever, we might want to do X dollars of revenue a year or a quarter or what have you. Or if we work for somebody else, we want to work up to partner or whatever those things are. But how do you want to feel about that? Right. I had a friend of mine years ago. She was an attorney and she hated her job. She worked, I couldn't tell you how many hours that woman worked. And, she was miserable. She didn't have family time. And then of course the family time was always disrupted because she was so stressed. And it negatively impacted everything else in her life. So that's why I like to sit down and look at everything together and decide. And then sometimes it's a trade-off, right? But you have to have those that are closest to you also buying into that, right? You have your stakeholders, right? Like your family's your stakeholders. They need to buy into that. So there might be 5 years of busting your ass, for lack of a better term.
Sure. Yeah.
But how do you balance all of that? And how do you balance all of that within your family? And that's an important conversation to have.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I want to come back to and I agree, you start with an assessment, where are you? And you look at, on my life satisfaction survey I use with my clients, I have 9 areas.
Yeah.
Right. Because there are a lot of different areas in life, and there could be 6, there could be 4, there has to be, I'd say at least 5 or 6 actually.
Yeah.
Could be 12, whatever. But how do you know for yourself, and how do you work with your clients to really identify those aspirations? Is it just the feeling that you mentioned? How do you want to feel in that category of life? And then you look for the things that you think maybe would bring you that feeling? Or is there some other tool that you use or some other process that you use for yourself or with your clients to help them to understand what it is that they really aspire to, what it is that they really want?
Well, that's part of it, but I ask a lot of questions. I just naturally ask a lot of questions, and I'm sure that you probably do too. So I have sort of formatted all of those questions into, it's a generic, these are generic modules, but the output is totally unique.
Right.
So when we start looking at that, and then the other thing is noticing patterns. So, start to notice where the patterns are that's pulling you out of your authenticity, your alignment, your irritation. So then I work with people to identify, because, so many people try to change everything at once, and you can't do that. That's a recipe for success. So
a recipe for disaster or success?
I'm sorry, disaster is what I meant to say. So thank you for catching that. So, we try to focus in on, okay, where can I get the biggest boost across my entire life? What's going to do?
So what's the highest leverage point? What's the one thing I can change that's going to make the biggest difference across everywhere else?
Yeah. And then, and we make sure we have that really dialed in. And then we go, okay, so how do you do that? And we figure out how to do that. And then it takes persistence, it takes awareness, it takes some dedication until that becomes habit. And then you do it again and again and again. And sometimes it's not a real major change. Often people think they have to do a major life overhaul. And you don't necessarily need to do that. Sometimes it's a smaller, quieter change, but it makes the biggest difference, and it gives you the outcome that you desire to achieve.
This episode of the Life in Transition podcast is brought to you by Midlife Transition Mastery. If you have reached midlife and you are successful, you have checked all the boxes, you've done everything you thought you should do, and especially pleasing everybody else, doing what you think everyone else needs you to do, but you still feel like something's missing. Like you're coming up empty, feeling alone, feeling misguided or lost. Midlife Transition Mastery Explorer community is for you. Here we will build authentic community. We will learn about the 8 steps to mastering midlife transition. and we will learn and execute living life with no regrets in our second half. Please check out the community on lifeintransition.online/MLTM, Midlife Transition Mastery. And I look forward to seeing you around the fire in this community. Right. And I can see that, like, if you're talking about especially areas of dissatisfaction, hey, I feel like I'm not with my family enough, or I'm too stressed, right? And what's an activity? What's the highest leverage point that I can change on that?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still wanting to drill into, though, because that's a little bit what you don't want. I don't want to feel stressed anymore. I don't want to be gone from my family all the time. Right. I don't, and then let's address those things. And what's the highest leverage activity? What's the one thing it can change? Some people do change a lot of things at once, but I know in lean manufacturing, the industry I'm from, like Toyota would say, never change more than 2 things at a time. Like if you change 3 things at the same time, you can't guarantee quality.
Right.
If you're changing. And sometimes you don't need the quality in life. Sometimes maybe you need to blow it up and start over. But if you want to manage it in a continuous path, you can't change more than 2 things at a time. But how do you see what it is that you really want? Right. I keep coming back to that because I think it's important to understand, it's a little bit the paradox of choice. Like, when was the last time you were at the Cheesecake Factory? That menu is overwhelming.
It's huge. Yes.
Right. It's overwhelming. Like, the paradox of choice is like you sit there and go, I have no idea. Like if you go to a Mexican restaurant, you get down to, 25 things, but Cheesecake Factory, it's whatever it is, 300 things or something on the menu. So if people have gotten to a point like you did, where they've made enough money, or they've had some success in their career and their kids are doing okay, and then they have the luxury, right, have the privilege of having a little bit of white space, a little bit of a blank paper. How do you start with, okay, where would I like to steer my life? I've done the things that maybe society has taught me that I should do. I've been a good spouse. I've been a good parent. I've made a little bit of money. I've got a college savings account for my kids. Now what?
We forget that as the seasons of our lives change, so do our values. Mm-hmm. And not necessarily our, what we often think of in values, but what is valuable to me.
Right.
And
what's important to you at different seasons.
Yes. And it's making conscious decisions. So the way that I explain it most often is, if the activities of your life are creating the momentum in your life, you're not necessarily aligned because you have lost the intentionality behind what you were doing. You had good intentions when you went down these various paths and made these decisions, but now you're just keeping up. Right. The snowball's rolling down the hill, and it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So at what point, when that little voice is starting to ask you, oh my God, this is all there is. This can't be all there is to life.
Right.
Or you're so terribly stressed out, or, whatever, because it's unique to everybody. That's generally what pushes people out of what I call automaton into going, okay, I need to make a change. What does that change need to be?
Right. So if you're on cruise control,
yes,
you're not being intentional about your life. You haven't thought about the direction in a while, and you're just being automatic. You're just on the wheel because that's what's got the momentum. Yeah, at some point, if you do that long enough, at some point something's going to wake you up,
mm-hmm.
right? Whether it's a health crisis or you lose that job that's on cruise control or whatever it is, because your heart's not in it anymore, you're not paying attention. You get to that point, you realize that you're asking these questions: is this all there is? Maybe, like I said, the job is gone now, and you have the white space. Then how do you choose? Okay, what's next?
Well, you get to choose whatever you want. I mean, I know it sounds vague, but you really, you really can. I mean, now within reason, right? You can't go from destitute to being a billionaire, right? You can't say, well, that's, so it's a matter of really saying, okay, what outcome am I really reaching for here? What is it that I really want?
Okay.
And if it's not creating that for you, then it's time to do the analysis to understand why. So why isn't it? And those whys are very personal and different from person to person and situation to situation. And I think developing a real understanding of that is what leads you to what I call your treasure map to joy, right? That's a big breadcrumb to say, okay, oh, this is it. That's interesting. And then you try to figure out, what you can do differently than you're doing to make a difference.
Towards your treasure map for joy. So this is a tool that you use. This is treasure map for joy. So that sounds like a process that is, like driving toward what it is you want, to figure out what it is you want.
It is. We work on, architecting the bridge, right? The gap. Here's where you are, and here's kind of what you'd rather be experiencing. So how do you think that we move from one to the other? And we do a lot of pattern recognition. We also look at, in my program anyway, I look at a lot of your character strengths and things like that, because if we're working in alignment with our natural abilities rather than against our natural abilities, it's usually a little bit easier.
For sure.
Yeah. And, then we start to say, okay, let's narrow this down to what will make the most meaningful change in my life. And then we figure out, what practically do you have to do? I have a very practical way of doing it. It's not that different than business process reengineering, right? So I should probably not do that. I should probably do this. Now, that can be habit of thought even. And that's why it seems probably so fluid, because sometimes it's just reframing the way you're thinking about it.
For sure. Very powerful.
Sometimes you actually just need a change. And you have to kind of figure that out. And it helps to, and you work with people, it helps to work with someone else because it broadens your perspective, right?
For sure.
We see here and we only see what we see. And even as much reading as we do, or if we're listening to podcasts, or I know so many people that have gone to so many seminars, and I've done it myself, right? Tony Robbins and all this stuff.
Yep.
And it's awesome. And you have some really big epiphanies in there. And, and you think, oh, I've had this breakthrough. Wow, I never thought of it that way before. But you go home and you do nothing about it. So it's taking that breakthrough to the next step and say, okay, how can I architect this into my life in a meaningful way that is effective and efficient and is going to create the change that I want?
Right. No, yeah, it doesn't matter what you know until you apply it. You
Right.
Really know about it. You can talk about it at a cocktail party, but that's about it.
Yeah, I say that peace of mind is our greatest personal asset. Yes. And that is certainly worthy of pursuit. The prerequisite for that is knowledge, but it is applied knowledge, not just gaining the knowledge.
Right. No, that's very well said. And I think, earlier we were talking about the feeling. You mentioned a lot. How do you want to feel, right, in that area of your life? And I think the underlying all of that is like, we want to feel good. We want to have peace of mind.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We want to have that peace that surpasses all understanding, regardless of what's going on around us. So how can we arrange our lives? How can we arrange our internal order and do our work to be able to be there? I'm going back to this transition that you talked about, Stacie, about, moving from the hospitality industry to office, which eventually was to, owning a software company. What did you learn from that process of leaving the hospitality industry to the office that informed the rest of your life? I know that was a long time ago. That gives you some perspective.
Long time ago. I think it comes back to just having confidence in myself that I could do something. And part of the reason that I made that change is because I got married, right? So I was working in a business where I worked nights and weekends.
Okay.
And I got married, and I thought to myself, well, probably a regular, 9 to 5 job would be a little bit more conducive
Right.
to this next season of my life, right? To bring it back to that. So I had the foresight, I guess, to recognize that and to start to make that change. And that's why I made that change.
Okay. And with the full perspective of where you are now and all the different seasons of life you've been through and all the different changes that you've been through, what would you tell your younger self if you could go back to that, right before you got married or making that change, that transition that you feel like really put your life on a different trajectory? What would you like that younger self to know that you know now?
I think, I'm not really one to change anything because I am who I am because of all the experiences that I've had.
For sure.
And I've had a lot, trust me. A child of I came up in the 70s and, I had a good time. So,
but that's not just related to the 70s. I came up in the 70s too, but I didn't have that much of a good time. So you were smart. You were smarter than me.
Yeah, I was out there experiencing all that life had to offer. Right. But because of that, I also developed the ability to, I could sit in a boardroom. I could talk to the homeless guy on the street. I could connect with people. The only thing that I believe that I have ever said, if I could change, I would have maybe gotten my MBA. And that's a very, I probably would have finished school and like to have gotten my MBA because I feel like I might have been unstoppable at that point, but I didn't need it. I didn't.
Right.
You did. In reality, I didn't need it. I did fine without it.
And is there anything? So that's a maybe something you would change. Is there anything that you would like that younger self of yours to know? Is there anything you would go back and tell them just that they would know? You said that it starts with knowledge.
Yeah, I certainly, if I had the wisdom that I had today, I would certainly do some things differently.
And it's not even to do them differently necessarily, but if you could, what advice would you give your younger self?
Just go, girl. Just that was my advice to myself, and that's kind of what I did.
What you would still do today? That's great, and that's
just go. Just step into it and go. I was a city girl, and I decided to raise llamas, and here I was, vetting and breeding and birthing animals. My mother was at the farm one day, and she's like, "Where did this come from? Where did you learn this?" But I was intensely attracted to it. I was passionate about it. And I think passion goes a long way too. And that's what I wanted to do. And I learned to do it very, very well.
So would that be the one thing, like if you had one piece of advice to pass on to our listeners, would that be it? And I've been drilling on this quite a bit about like, how do you know what you want? How do you know what you like? But to me, that sounded really
be passionate,
practical. And where does your passion take you? What is it that's really interesting to you? And be willing to follow that sort of regardless, like just this, be willing to follow that regardless of where it takes you in a sense, like regardless of how much logical sense it makes.
Yes. And release everybody else's expectations on that. I've given you a couple of examples, where I've done that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you can do that. But I think that's it. Be passionate, be involved, be present with what you're doing. Enjoy what you're doing. Ensure that it provides you your whole life with, and now I have had areas where it hasn't been so smooth, believe me.
Well, for sure. Yeah.
But, it should positively affect your life.
So whatever you're doing career-wise, positively affect your life, not just by the financial benefit you get, but by all the aspects of your life as well.
Yeah, in
your
most
interests,
ways.
your passions, your relationships.
Yeah. Because why would you want to go to a job you hate every day?
Right.
I
But
mean,
a lot of people do that.
they
And the
do.
why is because, well, I got to pay the bills. I got a mortgage and I got kids' college savings plans.
And yes, you do. But I'm going to guess that if you put some effort into it and expanded your horizons, that you could probably find or create something that will fulfill those needs and also give you the space to fulfill some others as well.
This episode of the Life in Transition podcast is brought to you by Transition Mastery Coaching. If you have made it to midlife and you're successful and you are going through transitions in your life, in your business, in your career, or in your organization, and you are looking to master those transitions, to make the most of them, to accelerate into the next phase of your organization or your life, if you're facing challenges in your business, challenges in your relationship, challenges in your health, and you really want to transition those quickly, I'm here to guide you for that. And I look forward to working with you. And you can sign up for either Pinnacle Transition Coaching or Summit. Please go to lifeintransition.online/MLTM and scroll to see the Summit and Pinnacle Coaching. Or reach out to me directly on my email, art@artblanchford.com. And I look forward to connecting with you and helping you to accelerate your transitions to achieve what it is that you want to achieve in the second half in your organization and in your life, so you can live your whole life with no regrets. Absolutely. And I've had a lot of guests on this show that have done exactly that. So if someone finds himself in that situation, right, where they're not so excited about Mondays right now, but they feel obligated because they have responsibilities that they need to fulfill, what's the first step that you would tell them to do? Like right now, if they could hit pause on this podcast and say, okay, I'm going to take this first step that they can do toward moving toward what it is they love to do.
Well, the first thing I would do is really sit down and understand why you hate what you're doing. What is it? Mm-hmm. Is it the job? Is it the person you've become? Is it that you're so stressed out when you get home that it's causing turmoil there? What is it? Because until you define the it, until you can start narrowing down what the it is, then it's just this general, I hate my job. And, unless you can name it, you can't do anything about it.
Right.
So name it. And it takes soulful exploration, right? And you have to be compassionate with yourself, and you have to approach it with open curiosity instead of judgment. Mm-hmm. And I think that those things are imperative. And on the flip side of that, when I had the software company and I worked in software for many years, and we had the technical help desk, right? We either had the application help desk, technical, and some of the management would always be like, I don't understand why these people don't, aspire to move up the food chain, as it were. Well, there are very, very valuable people in the organization. And if they're happy doing what they're doing, just because they're not aligning, with what you think somebody should be doing on a career path, doesn't mean it's wrong.
That's right.
So they loved coming in from 7 to 4 or whatever time, right?
And turning it off when they go home.
And that, and that's okay, right? So don't succumb to pressure on either side of it, I guess, is my point on that.
Yeah, I have a friend who's a big time consultant at a big time consulting company, and their spouse works at Google. And they've said, my spouse's ambition is to do just enough to not get fired and not get promoted. Right? Because they like their balance of life, and they like being able to help with the kids and help with the family, and they like what they're doing as well. So they want to stay there, but they also don't have any ambition to go up the ladder, and that's okay.
It is,
right? I think this hedonic treadmill that we're all on, that thinks that life has to always be up and to the right, and we always have to be doing more and more and more. If we disconnect with the joy of what we're doing, that leads to burnout, right? If we're just doing it because we're pleasing somebody else, or because we think that's what society expects of us, and that if we're not making $1 million a year, then we're not good enough, right? That's not a good reason. So yeah, that's true. If you're finding peace and joy in what you're doing and your life is working, great. And if not, then as you said, do the soulful exploration.
Yeah. How many
and find out.
multi-billionaires have you met that are absolutely miserable?
Yeah, I mean,
So-
yeah, that's yeah. I had a meeting with Marsha Goldsmith last week, is probably one of the number one coaches and leadership thinkers in the world, and him and I were talking about that. He's like, "What's enough financially?" He said, "Because I coach a lot of billionaires that are miserable." So you have to decide for yourself what's enough. And once you have enough, then you got to put that equation out. You can't come back and say, "Oh, I need 1 million, 1 billion, 100 million, 1,000, $1 more." The more is the word that trips us up, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's enough? And then focus on the things that bring you, as you said, this peace and joy that you feel like you're making a contribution.
Yes, so, contribution is important as well.
Yeah, no, it is. It is. And it doesn't, that word along with purpose is very, can be very heavy, because we think, we have to contribute and we have to make $10 million doing our contribution and doing service and monetize it and go public. And, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, which is,
well, that's the thing about purpose too. We think that our life's mission, I don't know my purpose in life. We think that's going to be angels coming down from the skies, with trumpets going this, and it's not that way. Right. And even our purpose changes over time, mm-hmm. right? Our purpose at some point in our time, it wasn't mine, is growing our career.
Yeah.
And that's great. If you're in, that's good. There's something wrong with that.
Right.
Someone else's purpose, a mom might be a stay-at-home mom, and her purpose in that season of life is to raise her kids.
Absolutely. Maybe the most important job, not maybe, right. The most important job there is on the planet, right?
And that is purpose, but yet
absolutely.
We have all this, stuff from society that's like, you're just a stay-at-home mom, or, whatever.
Just a stay-at-home mom, yeah.
And, it's not anything that's necessarily shouted by angels from the mountaintops, right? It is, your purpose is what you make your purpose to be. And I think for me, it's peace of mind. I mean, I said that to my mother. I think there's a manatee out there in the canal. I'm sitting here on Siesta Key. My mother, I was little, maybe 4 or 5 years old, right? And they were very involved in church, and every once in a while she would dangle that that guilt carrot, of you need to do X, Y, Z because of whatever. And I remember, and she told me this story for years and years. I looked at her and put my hand on my hip and said, "You know what? As long as I'm at peace with myself, I think Jesus will be okay with it."
There you go. There you go.
And it's true,
absolutely.
Have solid values and integrity and, all of those things, but, be at peace.
Yeah. Yeah. Everything, one of the questions that I like to ask myself as well is, what do you want by getting what you want? Right? Because, I want to have $1 billion, or, I want to have a Porsche, or, I want to have the bigger house, or I want to have whatever it is. I want to have vacations on all the continents every year or whatever. But what is it that you really want? Right? What is it that you want by getting what you want?
Mm-hmm.
And that helps me to understand. And below most of those, if you ask that question 5 times, it comes down to peace of mind, feeling good about myself, feeling like I'm making a difference.
I love that exercise, and the why. It's very similar.
Yeah, that's the same thing. It's almost like
why do you want them? You need to go down 5 or 7 levels until you get that one that really tugs at your heart, right? And it might even bring a tear to your eye.
Right. If it doesn't, it's not moving you, right? If
right. And then it's like, okay, that's the right answer, and that's the answer to get to when you're charting your treasure map to joy, or anything.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So, I mean, there's several tools that people can work on today, but really is, to really pay attention to your passion, or even just your curiosity. If passion feels too strong, to really pay attention to that, to listen to your intuition, to ask yourself why, or what do I want by getting what I want, to help you drive into it. And then to realize that there also are a lot of different seasons to life. As you were saying, there's a lot of transitions, and it's not meant to be the same. What we're doing when we're 68 or 53 is going to be different than what we were doing at 35, even if it's in the same company or even the same position. The way you do it and how you show up is going to be really different, and that's okay. And even as you said, going all the way back to, making the decisions to, so that it fits better to the family, to that phase of life. Absolutely right. But to do those things with a feeling of peace.
Yeah. Or at least have your family enlisted, right? So that everybody, everybody's working toward the same goal and the same outcome, because, short term, we can do some of those things as long as everybody's on board.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember I was considering an opportunity at one point that was a consulting gig, and it's super intense, and I knew I was going to be gone a lot. And even when I was home, I was going to be on the weekends. I was going to have the young kids, but they were going to be with me at the plant that I owned, working on the business. And I said, okay, this is going to be for 9 to 12 months. If I take it, are you guys in? I talked to, even my kids were, I don't know, 5 to 12 or something at the time. And had that conversation with them, and offered a little bit of bribe. I said, when I'm done with this, then I also go anywhere we want to go.
Nothing wrong
for
with that.
A week or 10 days, right? but still, even at that age, gave them a choice. Do you think I should do this or not? Right? And then they all said, yeah, we think this is going to suck for a while, because for 6 months to 9 months, 12 months, I'm going to be gone every week during the week.
Well, it sets expectation, and I can't say enough about setting expectations. When, then, if you haven't set those, when expectations are not met, that's when we become disheartened and upset. So and you have to articulate what those expectations are. And that makes a huge difference. And that's what you did with your family.
Yeah. Yeah. And we had a great time. We had Thanksgiving down in somewhere in the Bahamas.
Awesome.
Atlantis. That's what they wanted to do. So we took a whole week and with friends, and went down there with friends and spent a week and had a great time. And then things balanced out after that. But that was different than I had done it before, where I'd just go off like crazy working and not notice and not involve them. So that's good stuff. Stacie, it's been a super interesting conversation with you. And I love that you have the confidence and courage to follow your intuition, to follow your passions. And I love that it's also worked very well for you in your life. It's really an inspiration. If people want to find out more about you, where can they connect with you?
My website has everything on it, social and, just everything. So that's modern.
And what's your website?
modernconsciousness.com.
Awesome. Very good. And we'll put all of your bio and all of your connections in the show notes as well. Awesome. But Stacie, thank you so much for having this really enlightening conversation with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
I can't wait to hear what action you are taking. Connect with me on LinkedIn or our website, lifeintransition.online, and let me know. Let a friend know too. It could be a huge encouragement to them and keep you on the track. Thank you so much for joining me today. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and it would mean a lot to me if you left a review and shared this episode with a friend. If you want to learn more about me and what I do when I'm not podcasting, please visit me at artblanchford.com. Thank you for listening. Together, let's make the most of life in transition.